Welcome to today's episode where we will dive into how early education is evolving and what private schools need to know to stay ahead. Expectations for young learners are shifting. Kindergarteners are now tackling skills once reserved for first grade, and play-based learning is meeting rising academic pressures. So, how can private schools navigate these changes while staying true to developmentally appropriate practices? Well, we're thrilled to have Elizabeth Fraley with us as an expert in early education trends to break it all down. She works closely with families transitioning into private schools and knows exactly what schools can do to better support young learners and meet parent expectations. So, this episode is brought to you by Help 100 Schools. We are a movement dedicated to helping private schools expand their impact, growth, enrollment, and strengthen communities. Whether through virtual events, enrollment challenges, or expert training, Help 100 Schools is here to support schools like yours. So let's get started. How is early education changing, and what should private schools be doing right now to adapt? And with that, let me introduce Elizabeth Fraley, who is the current CEO and founder of Kinder Ready Incorporated. After spending over 3 years as a director of early elementary program, Elizabeth started her own educational service company. Elizabeth gained national attention with a program she developed back in 2016. Elizabeth's work has been featured in Time Magazine, the Los Angeles Times, the Hollywood Reporter, CBS Local, SF Gate, along with a feature in Popular Mechanics and the Big Little Book of Awesome Stuff by Dan Bova. Elizabeth was recently awarded with an Educator of the Year award from the County of Los Angeles for her service to the community. Elizabeth has been featured on Hallmark Home and Family with CNN journalist Lisa Ling. Elizabeth is an education contributor for HuffPost. Elizabeth's teaching philosophy offers a structured curriculum with progressive approaches to highly individualized teaching and learning. Elizabeth has over a decade of experience in early learning, specializing in assessment, curricular development, English language learning, and progress monitoring for grades preschool to 6th grade. Elizabeth has specialized training in Love and Logic, a social and emotional curriculum. Elizabeth enjoys working with families and working with children to help them reach their fullest potential as learners. Elizabeth, welcome to the show.
So thank you so much, Carl, for having me. Great to be here today.
It is a pleasure. Well, this one is for early development, isn't it? Let's jump in. So things have changed a bit over the years, haven't they? How can you help set the tone for what has changed and what does the current look like?
Sure. I think that there's been a huge shift in academics. So we're seeing a lot of academic trends that, when I was in kindergarten, we were learning the alphabet and we were in our dramatic play area having a blast. Now, today, students are expected to do so much more from reading, more progressive math approaches. So there's been a total shift. So I think that preschool should really be all about the social and emotional aspects of learning and sharing and growing emotionally. But also, there's ways that we can reach learners so that when they do transition to kindergarten, they do so in a way where they feel ready, they feel confident. But math is so different. It was, very rote growing up. Now it's a lot of higher order thinking, critical thinking, breaking apart numbers and really dissecting problems. And I think a lot of those ways that we learn, have shifted. So we now need to empower our parents, our students, and our schools in a way to really best support the students. Yes.
Love it. And just so the audience can sort of crystallize the perspective, who are you most often speaking with at private schools?
Typically, I'll work with all the administrative staff at schools. We will do periodic check-ins on students. Are they performing well academically? We'll do periodic meetings on students, and then we'll really take a look at assessment data, pre-assessments and post-assessments after our work together. We want to really ensure that the kids are meeting all the benchmarks and goals set aside by not only the school, their families, and then also just really building a great community partnership.
Perfect. Thank you. Alrighty. And what key trends are you seeing that are shaping the way that younger children are learning today?
So I think the big part is really math. I think that's probably been the most change. So, in kindergarten, we really used to do a lot of play, and now kids, if you open up a typical kindergarten math curriculum, you're seeing number bonds and 10 frames, and it's totally shifted. So a lot of, and I think that the parents are a bit perplexed because they've never seen these types of formats, and so it could be a little daunting for some of the parents. And and I think our role really is just to help families feel better about the shifts and trends and changes and ways that they can help their child. So in sessions, we'll hone in on these skills ahead of time so that when kids do see them in a classroom setting, they can approach it with, confidence, and having that pre-exposure early on just makes a world of difference. And same for the parents. If they see particular questions or type of math that, is very unfamiliar to them, they can, also feel very confident as well. And then, even just socially, I think, the preschool experience is really about learning about transitions, like going into new places and new experiences. And I think through our program and work with the families, kids can feel more confident, they can manage their time more effectively. There's so much more that they're capable of, not only in the realm of math, but socially. Having the responsibility of a weekly class can help them, manage their time, be more efficient, more organized. So those are the two big things with the social piece and then the math. And then also the reading. So again, many years ago in kindergarten, a lot of kids were still learning letters, still learning sounds, just kind of exploring more through play. Where today, kids are given assessments at the beginning of the year. Typically, there's one called DIBELS, and the children are assessed in the fall, and then in the winter, and then in the spring. And they're looking for certain benchmarks. So, letter sound fluency, word identification, all these different areas. So they really want to see that the students are grasping the concepts, and they'll get their instructional reading level, and then they'll group the students accordingly. So it's also another reason for them to enjoy some outside supplemental work so that they can really feel confident when they are grouped by ability. They can feel a little bit more confident and secure as they're starting their learning, you know, at this age. So.
That's great. Well, it's interesting. I've heard you talk as well about play-based learning and how that still fits. And I guess I should just ask you, how does it still fit in from a programmatic standpoint and balancing of priorities with early development?
But you're still going to see some dramatic play. It's going to be mostly in the preschool ages, so like a developmental kindergarten or a preschool age. But by the time kindergarten starts, you're not going to see much of that. But dramatic play is really important because children can role play specific scenarios. A lot of times there's a housekeeping area where kids are preparing food. They're making meals, they're planning, they're counting, they're exposing themselves to vocabulary, they're working with other people. So there's a lot of skills that are accomplished through this type of learning, but it's a very roundabout way to get to the learning. So typically we see this type of learning more in a preschool or DK setting. Kindergarten, it's pretty much obsolete. Um, Students really the only time in their day for dramatic play would be outside recess time or possibly during a literacy block. They may do some type of theatrical reading or something where they might read with intonation or expression, and that would kind of be the extent of it. I think most of it you're going to see in those pre-K and DK years.
Okay, that sounds good. All right. Well, and are there specific challenges that are related to play-based learning that have sort of come up in the recent research?
The research really does support dramatic play. However, I think a pivotal point is really in that DK year or that last final year a child is getting ready for kindergarten. So it's very helpful to establish friendships, social and emotional development. But as we go from, the winter and spring and start transitioning to the next school year, that's really the time that these pre-kindergarten programs, the research does show kids that engage in these types of programs see a lot of growth for the coming school year. They'll see it in reading and fine motor skills, even in their social skills. So programs that really set the stage for what's to come in kindergarten do make a dramatic difference from what, all the journals say, all the different research that's out there.
That's great. Okay, so then is as sort of a crystallizing takeaway there, is there a balance that educators should keep in mind related to I'm really looking at those three concepts of as a bit of a triangle, but maybe you could correct that if that's not the right way to think of it, whether it's play based and emotional, social, and then you've got more mathematic. How do you think of it, or how would you suggest that the educators think about it to make sure that there's a structured balance that's appropriate?
I think it really, at the end of the day, it really depends on the individual child. So you could have a child with really great social skills and maybe their math needs a lot of work, or maybe there's another child that is a great reader, but their math needs work. So I think that it's each triangle. I kind of look at each child as a triangle and I look at how are their social skills? How are their literacy skills? How are their math skills? And it's very rare to see all points of those triangles, being exceptional. There's always something to work on. But I typically see kids that are more logical and mathematical in the ways that they think. I see some kids that are very conversational, and that kind of goes along with the literacy. So they're typically, great conversationalists and they have good comprehension skills and reading skills. So a lot of those go hand in hand. I think at the end of the day, we just really have to look at each individual, but also realize that, really look at the scope and sequence of a kindergarten curriculum and just ensure that these preschool students are feeling confident and prepared when they enter in the classroom. I think another key point is when you're in a group setting with instruction going on, how much of that are they retaining? And I think that these weekly classes really help get them on board as far as following directions. Oftentimes, there's multiple steps that kids have to listen for and comprehend. So I think setting the stage early with classes and getting them ready for what's to come is really the most important thing.
That's great. So we want balanced triangles.
Exactly. Exactly.
Excellent. Okay. And how are parent expectations shifting when it comes to early learning and school admissions?
I think parents, they really look at their experiences they had growing up and what worked well and maybe what didn't work as well. And I think they're really using those experiences as they now kind of parent and work with their young child. And I think that, we have to manage expectations and really set goals. And I think that the more that we know before we start the instruction, the more that we have as far as the assessment measures, I think that that really speaks for itself. And then typically we'll co-develop goals with the parent to make sure that we're meeting kind of the philosophy of the school that they'll be attending, their own, philosophies of how they feel about education, and just kind of merging those all together. And I think, as well, like communication is such an important piece. So every class that we meet with students, we are keeping the parents updated as far as what we're doing, what's working, and then maybe skills that we are continuing to grow.
That's great. Okay. And in terms of, well, we talked a little bit about structure. How can private schools better support families as they transition from preschool to the more structured curriculum?
I think that we really have to look at the preschool where they're transitioning from. So, for example, if it's a very academic preschool, we could be taking a look at end of year assessment. Where is that child instructionally? And then using that information to support the child as they get ready for school in the fall. So, we want to make sure that this child doesn't feel overwhelmed if they're coming from more of an academic preschool. We want to keep a nice balanced approach. If the child is coming from a more play-based preschool, we'll want to look at the end of the year observations and maybe make suggestions to that preschool or that family. Hey, this child is really good at these skills. However, in kindergarten, these are some of the expectations that we'll be seeing in the fall and winter months. We just want to make sure that this child is ready for those learning goals.
That's great. Okay. And when you're working with a school and with families, what what kind of process do you usually go through in a way that supports their development through the private schools?
Sure. So I'll use what's called a developmental continuum. So I'll look at specific benchmarks and goals for the ages. And then I'll also team up with schools to see what is their scope and sequence of the curriculum that they're implementing and just make sure that it's a consistent fit. So I want to make sure that we're hitting all the areas that we need to, but again, doing it in a way that is really developmentally appropriate practice. So, for example, if I'm working with a 3 to 5 year old, I'm not going to be doing an activity, longer than 20 minutes at a time. Something will change, we'll get out different manipulatives, we'll change the subject matter. So, we really want to be in tune with the child and what their needs are and what is developmentally sound at the end of the day.
Sounds like a lot of it sounds like a very customized approach.
Oh yeah, and I think themes are a really great way to grab the attention of young. There's always an element of surprise or something to look forward to in the sessions and classes. So I think that's really how you maintain students and keep them engaged and happy with their learning.
Very nice. And I'm just curious, would you say that there are some recurring aha moments that come through with the process of working between the families and the schools?
Sure. I think, what's really special is some of the families are multi-sibling families. So it's really great because the first child is kind of our test friend. We can kind of see like what worked, what didn't work. And that actually helps us quite a bit. You'd be surprised how many multi-sibling families we have with 2 and 3 children. But I think at the end of the day, it's just getting as much information as possible about the child. What is their personality like? What themes or activities do they respond to? What are the end goals for the family? And then ultimately, you know, what school will they be attending? And we have an idea of the curriculum that will be used so that we can take all of those aspects and really merge it together and just make it a really positive experience for not only the child, the family, the school, and all involved. So yes, I think it's just really like, looking at all those details and then just putting it all together. Yeah.
Well put. Are there any typical misconceptions that you have to address around early education?
I think a lot of times there are, a lot of people have a mindset that, children need to just play and enjoy, their early childhood development, that whole period. And I totally agree. I think at the end of the day, the social and emotional skills supersede any type of learning because without those social skills, you don't have any learning. Like you will not be able to learn if you don't have those early social skills. And so I really like align with letting kids be kids, letting them have time to play. But I think it's really about balance. If a child's at a play based preschool Monday through Friday, they're getting a lot of time for dramatic play. So an hour once a week of more structured learning would be very appropriate. If a child's in more of an academic preschool, you may have to really take a look and see, is the child getting enough exercise? To me, exercise would be a priority maybe over a learning class. So, but again, you have to go back to the individual too. So, a child could be at an academic preschool and go to an academic kindergarten, but still need some support. So, at the end of the day, it's really about the individual. But I will say that balance is everything.
Great. Okay. And then any practical steps that a private school can take to improve their early learning and outcomes?
I think partnering with early learning organizations such as Kinder Ready or Elementary Wise program for learners 6 and up is really a great way to build partnerships. There's a lot of great organizations out there that provide supplemental support, and I think partnering with them and knowing a little bit more about the curriculum map of the school, if there's any new programs that are adopted, letting us know about that. But we're pretty, we're pretty dialed in with the schools and what curriculums they are using. So that has been super helpful. I think at the end of the day, we really just need to know what programs they're using, what's working, and then look at that individual child. But that's really the best way to approach that. Mhm.
Great. Okay. Well, before we sort of wrap up, I'd love to hear your thoughts on where you would like to see this direction go over time. Just looking ahead, how do you see and where would you like to see early education evolving?
Sure. I think, we really have to go back to a lot of the social and emotional skills. Like I feel like mental health is really important for children. I feel like this year in particular has been a really challenging year in the Los Angeles area. We unfortunately had several fires, the Palisade fire, the Altadena fire. So a lot of the students were greatly impacted with, missing school, getting caught back up. A lot of those, life transitional changes, that a lot of the families had to deal with. So I think really prioritizing mental health and boosting all of the social skills, I think is always going to be a great way to learn. And I think again, the stronger the social skills, the stronger the academic skills. So I think that the key is really balance, but I feel like this year in particular, the focus would really just be those social skills and then finding that balance within the learning aspects.
Excellent. Perfect. All right. Well, Elizabeth, is there anything that you would have liked to add here?
Sure. We're really excited this week on Friday. We will know about our students and where they end up for private school. So the timing of this interview was great. So a lot of the students will, they'll find out Friday at 5 o'clock where they're going to be starting kindergarten and where they're headed for the years to follow. So we're really excited for the families and we are really hopeful for all of our students.
Perfect. All right. Well, Elizabeth, thank you so much for being on the show. Where can people go to learn more about you and to reach you?
Great. Yeah. So clients can visit our website at kinderready.com. There is a contact form, so feel free to send us any requests or questions that you have about our program, and someone will get back to you thereafter.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
So, yeah.
Well, that's a wrap on today's conversation, folks. Early education is evolving fast, and private schools have an incredible opportunity to adapt, innovate, and better support young learners and their families. A huge thank you to Elizabeth Fraley for sharing her insights on how schools can navigate these changes while keeping both academic rigor and child development in balance. If you found this discussion valuable, please be sure to subscribe and share this episode with fellow school leaders. Until next time, thank you all. Thank you for tuning in to Help 100 Schools. If today's feature struck a chord with you, we encourage you to share it. Your action can bridge the gap between deserving schools and families looking for a place where their children can thrive. Want to dive deeper or help more? Visit help100schools.com. Your engagement is the fuel that drives our mission forward, helping us to reach and support more schools. So remember to subscribe to our show. This way you'll never miss the stories that could inspire, move, or motivate us all to contribute to a better educational future. Together, let's light up the path for education, one school at a time. We're grateful for you and your support and for spreading the word. Stay tuned for more stories that will make a difference. Until next time, continue to be the change in education. Farewell for now.